Okay, so I want to respect everybody's time, so why don't we get started? So, welcome. This is Merge Mayhem. So, we're going to be talking about merging records in Razor's Edge, and we're lucky enough to be joined actually by two people out in the field, like all of you. So, I'll be introducing them. So, it's not going to be just me. You get to hear about a lot of different experiences. We want this to be a very active conversation, so please feel free to ask questions and I'll toss them to our panel. So I'm Marlisa Post. I'm a database specialist with donor database experts, and I've been with the company for about 4 years, and I have 30 years of fundraising experience. That always hurts a little bit. And I'd love to introduce my panelists. So Nicole Duncan is with us, and she is the Director of Advancement for the Sisters of St. Francis of Assisi. She brings 20 years of experience in advancement operations and annual giving. She's led database conversions for healthcare and higher education, very impressive, and in the past, and has most recently combined three legacy systems into the current Razor's Edge environment. Nicole runs a small shop with a large, and I do mean large, direct mail program and is responsible for all aspects of fundraising for the healthcare and retirement needs of the remaining sisters in the order. So as you can hear, Nicole probably has some scars and really good stories.
Yeah, my 20 plus years also hurts, Marlisa.
Right? We don't look a day over 10 years experience. I'm also excited to welcome Denise Verhaeg. Denise is the Foundation Database Coordinator for the Center for Philanthropic Excellence at Unity Point Health. She has supported philanthropy there for over 12 years and has co-led the migration of 12 foundation databases into one central system, now focusing on optimizing data to improve accuracy, efficiency, and donor stewardship across the organization, so across a large healthcare organization. And again, you hear that word migration, you also know Denise has some good stories and some battle scars. And very excited to welcome my teammate, Steph Williams. So, Steph Williams is a consultant in data and systems at Donor Database Experts, where she combines her expertise and great enthusiasm to elevate nonprofit fundraising operations. She's a true data enthusiast and excels at leveraging information to enhance organizational efficiencies and mission impact. Steph's achievements include launching a successful Grateful Patient program, designing a multi-stream annual direct mail campaign. She has experience with fundraising tools, including Blackbaud Razor's Edge, Pomatic products, Luminate Online, Classy, as well as other online donation platforms. So welcome and thank you so much for giving your time today.
Thank you.
So I would love to kick this off with a little bit of talk about Nicole and Denise, your experiences with Merge Mayhem. And I will share with our attendees that Donor Database Experts has worked with both organizations on some large merging, deduping, and record reduction projects with both of these organizations. But I'm excited for them to share their point of view, again, as the people sort of out there in the trenches. So Denise, if it's okay, I'm going to start with you. Could you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about what led your organization to realize you needed to do some work around this process?
Well, when we finished our conversion of the 12 foundation databases into the one central database, um, we knew just because of the fact that our organization spans Iowa and a little bit in Illinois, a little bit in Wisconsin, that, just because it's such a close range of foundations, that we would have duplicates that were coming from the different databases. And so um, we at that point realized that we needed help. We reached out to DDX and brought them in, and really at that point decided we needed help with duplicates and finding those. We had been using Importomatic through our conversion, and so at that point, Merge-O-Matic, we had access to that, and DDX had a lot of experience utilizing that functionality. And so we started with individuals and went through all of the individual records found many, many duplicates. I don't even have a number to put out there. Too many to count, I guess. Went through individual relationships and orgs. Still working on orgs a little bit. It's been about 4 years now since we've been converted into those days, and we still find duplicates today. So, but those tools help tremendously, as well as, having those experts at utilizing them.
Wonderful. Nicole, so same question. Can you talk a little bit about what was in your database prior? What led you to realize maybe you needed to go through this whole process?
Absolutely. So when I've been with the sisters here for about 2 years now, and when I came in, DDX had been brought on as basically an implementation consultant to really help this shop walk through the conversion of 3 legacy systems. There was 2 databases with one company. There was a third with eTapestry, which was another Blackbaud product. So we had different formats and fields going into the combining of these systems. And so just by sheer volume, we had a combined 1.2 million records that were going into one system. So knowing that, and we knew from other analytics here that the direct mail pieces that were being mailed were just exorbitant. We were sending duplicates and sometimes triplicates and quadruplicates to people. So it was definitely on our radar that we needed to comb through all of these records and work on this merge process. So DDX was really instrumental in helping kind of lay the groundwork for that. Again, we're a small shop. It's myself and an associate director here, and really that's the 2 people that have been primarily involved in this type of conversion. So being able to, assist us with looking at the big picture of data, kind of suggesting some strategies for where we go first. We take some of these older records, we take some of these deceased people and people that haven't given in 10 or 15 years, and think about the plans for how we're gonna to purge and move some of that stuff. So I think it really we wouldn't have done it as well on our own, that's for sure. We definitely needed some hand holding, and it I'm happy to report that, our goal is to get under 400,000 records, and we will have accomplished that probably by the end of this month. So it's all a work in progress, but it's going well.
I think I heard the collective gasp of everyone attending when they heard how many records you were starting out with.
Yeah.
I think this is a great segue for me to talk to you, Steph. And once we kind of go through talking about everyone's experiences, of course, we also want to give practical tips and
Yeah.
even maybe weave them throughout here. So, Steph, as you talk about how we approached each of these projects, can you talk a little bit about the thought process? So maybe someone facing this who can't bring in a consultant, what kind of thought process they should go through as well.
Yeah, I think a big part of it first is just understanding like why it matters. And sometimes that is also understanding for you and being able to explain to your leadership team, like, hey, this is by having all of these duplicates, we really need to put some resources into that, whether it's staff time, whether it's bringing in another piece of software, a consultant, whatever that is internally or externally. Because it does both from a data point. If you're a data person, I know it just kind of drives you nuts and eats at you when you go to search for somebody and there's 2 or 3 of them. But from a donor relations perspective too, it doesn't look good if you send out a year-end appeal, if you send out, an event invitation and it's going to the same person 2 or 3 times, or as I've seen at past nonprofits where I've worked, you might have it to the husband and then the wife and then one going to the both of them combined. It doesn't look great. It doesn't make your organization look great. And you can capture them sometimes in mailing lists, looking in, Excel at addresses, things like that, but it's not efficient and you're doing it every single time you run a mail list. So I think one of the big things to start with is just understanding like what this does to your database. I think another piece of it that I think a lot of nonprofits are facing is that Blackbaud's costs are going up significantly in a lot of cases. I don't think everyone might have 1.2 million records that they're trying to get down to 400,000. That's probably the extreme. But sometimes if you can, find, identify and merge 1,000, that might give you another year's worth of event registrations to worry about before you have to worry about the next level. So a big part of it when we work with clients is, why does this matter? What effects are you seeing from it? And then from there, it's okay, let's look at who you've got in your database. Where's your data coming from? Where do we think a lot of these dupes are being created from? And oftentimes it's online forms, it's event registrations, it's, the kind of bulk uploads where you're not having someone necessarily go line by line and searching in a batch to make sure the person's not already in the system. So that can be a great place to start to look for where the duplicates might exist too. So that's, kind of those easy groups. And so those are a lot of times when we tackle first. I don't know how much more you want me to talk through process, but I think, the next piece for us is, if we find two people that are a duplicate, which one, to borrow from Omatic's terminology, which one gets to be the survivor of the duplicate merge? And for every org that looks a little bit different, usually it's, if they're a board member, if they, are on one of our giving societies, that is the more important record. It's probably got more data. I think working with Nicole and her team, we switched that around a few times during the process too. I think at first we were like, if it came from one of the, if it came from this of the three databases, it's probably the most accurate. And then it was, if it's the most recent gift, it's probably the one we want because we've touched that record more recently. So it's a lot to consider. And sometimes that's a matter of 100 records. Sometimes it's a matter of a couple 100,000. So it is, though, one of my favorite projects personally, because it is incredibly satisfying to see your mail list numbers go down and know you're not sending these duplicates. So it can be a long process, though. I think I remember, this is a side note, whatever. One of the first trainings I was in when I was brand new to Razor's Edge and Blackbaud, longer ago than I'll say, was a duplicate training. And I remember the Blackbaud trainer saying something about how your duplicates are like your laundry. You could spend all day, and the next week you're just going to have more anyway. So I think that's a good mindset too, is to treat it not only is it this one big bulk cleanup process, it is an ongoing data health need that you need to pay attention to too. Sometimes it might be a huge, chunk to get you down to where you want to be, but it's never going to end, good or bad. So keeping that in mind too, so there's not, you're not trying to reach that zero duplicate. But
I love that analogy. I think also weeds might be another good analogy, especially this time of year, or whack-a-mole maybe.
I have 3 kids, so the laundry thing really,
Yeah,
really resonated.
So, Steph, could you speak a little bit about how you approach, Unity's data versus Sisters data, and kind of the different paths you needed to take just because of the unique situations for each of them?
Yeah, so I think one of the big pieces to note about Nicole's, and please feel free to step in and interrupt me or correct me if you need to. I kind of came into your project partway through the conversion, is in their case, they were bringing in large amounts of data from 3 different systems. And so I think one of the first questions is, do you want to try to attack these duplicates as you're putting the data in? Or do you want to just dump everything in and then find the duplicates afterwards? And I think that's a piece where actually you guys are 2 great examples, because Sisters, Nicole, they said, let's just dump everything in. Then we've got the right constituent ID so that we can, track back to all of the gifts that need to come in from these files, all of the actions, all of that stuff. Whereas Unity, you guys tried to manage the dupes as they came through, I think, right? To some level.
After our conversion,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So it kind of, how much data is coming in. It's, what another big part of it is, what other products, what other resources do you have internally to handle it? I know we'll talk about Omatic a lot probably, because their duplicate matching far exceeds anything Razor's Edge can do natively. So if you can bring in through that and it can check for the duplicates as you go, that can be great. But if you have hundreds of thousands of records, then sometimes you're better off just getting everything in, and then you can see the whole picture at one time. And, in Nicole's case, you might then pull up a record and there's literally 3 or 4 I don't know if we ever found five, but
Yeah.
3 or 4 duplicates because they gave to different programs that had their own databases.
Yep.
And you can kind of take care of all of those at once and get a much better holistic picture of it. So I think that's the first thing for us is how many duplicates do you have? Where did they come from? And how quickly do you need to get these people in versus do you have, do you want to get everything in and then take a look at them afterwards and come up with a game plan when you have a better idea of how many dupes might actually be out there?
I will say that it was definitely, the frontline gift officers definitely played a huge role in identifying the duplicates because as gifts were coming in, we wanted to make sure that the most recent donors were deduped first, right? So that we could stay on top of our mailing list. So we did keep a side spreadsheet here just internally so that we could keep track of the duplicates that we identified. So our team was helping to aid in the identification process of which one we want to keep versus which one needs to be merged in.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good point is make sure that you have the person who's doing your merging be very, very familiar with your data and have like that right balance of confidence to just kind of push the button and finally do it, but also enough to know like, okay, I really need to check every data field here and make sure it's the right person. And so I think that was a great point, Nicole. You had them tell you and they kept a list and then those could be handled by someone who knew the data well enough to actually do the merging, but it also gave the rest of your team buy-in on the process and a way to say, oh, I found another one. Don't forget this one. So.
And because with our systems too, we were also finding, that there was probably a lack of NCOA updates, address moves and things. So we would have duplicate people that were at 2 different addresses that would require a little bit more digging. And ultimately we'd find out, yes, that is the same person. They just moved and they were in one system at an old address and one system at a new address. So that just added to the frustration, but it's part of the process.
Denise, was that your experience as well, or did you also have some other issues as you went through this process?
So I was just say, Steph mentioned, using Informatic to, when you're bringing the data in, and that catching some of those duplicates, and that's really what we did when we brought all of our data in. We caught a lot of duplicates through that process. Now, obviously, it was hard because we with the 12, it was over like an 18-month period, and so obviously you're going to bring in all of that first market, and then the next one, you might have some duplicates here and there, and they might be at different stages, different addresses, things like that. So we really caught as many duplicates as we could through that process.
Mhm.
And it was probably maybe 6 months after we were finally done. And then we kind of started that merge-matic process and we started similar to what you had said before. We started with the donors, the most recent donors first, anybody who'd given in the last 6 months. And then we kind of went back from there, taking the groups that were most close to the organization and so on and so forth, and then cleaned it up that way. So yeah, it was a good experience to do it like that. I'm glad that we did have Informatic going in because I think we would have had quite a bit more duplication if we hadn't had that tool. So.
Great. And I do want to eventually talk about the various tools, but I'd love to close out sort of the personal experiences first. So, Denise, what did you once you went through the process of doing all of this, the never-ending process? But did you notice, an improvement, hopefully? But were there also things at the end that you went, oh, I wish we'd approached this differently, or oh, we didn't think of this one thing? Any thoughts around that?
I'm not sure that I necessarily, had any, epiphanies of, oh, we wish we would have done this or that. I do know that, there are things that I wish that like the database utility would have, looked for different things. So before we were using Mergematic, I think we were not finding, as much as we could. But I think that, yeah, I don't know that I would have necessarily done anything differently than what we did.
Mhm. And Nicole, same question.
I thought about that in terms of should we have done more cleanup on the front end before we dumped everything in? But again, I think you just have to assess your scenario And when I looked back, I thought, no, this was probably still the best way to do it. If anybody has that luxury, to look at their system before going into the merge or the conversion, I think just being on top of those data health points will be really, really helpful.
And then Steph on the back end, but same question to you about both of the projects.
Yeah, I think the big thing is just kind of being aware of how big the project is. So I think, like Nicole said, with her volume, I mean, obviously in an ideal world, you have someone who can sit there and check every record as they're coming in. When it's hundreds of thousands, that's just not going to work unless you are going to pay some poor intern like literally 24 hours a day for a year to only like check for your duplicates. I will say, I think one of the big things that comes up when you do merging is making sure that you keep a good record of what was on each record as much as you can. So if you, by accident, merge someone who you later on find out maybe was a junior and a senior, or they weren't the same person. I have an organization I used to work at that had two board members with the exact same name. And so we saw, oh, they were both board. They have first name, middle initial, last name. I mean, it was a Smith, so it wasn't like super crazy, but so we had someone merge them thinking they were the same, and then untangling that afterwards, um, keeping whatever data you can. I think if I can channel one of our other coworkers and other stuff on our team, it's to take all the backups you can before you start doing a huge project. So even if that's just a quick export of all of your constituents and addresses, export of gifts and things like that, so that you do have some backup to go to if you need to afterwards. And just being realistic about how long the process is going to take. Like Denise said, it took a year and a half to get all of those records in and cleaned up, and that's not unrealistic for the project size it was.
Yeah, we're about a year in and we're still not completely done yet. But yeah, I
And
wish
we
it
have spent
were.
a lot of time on your duplicates.
Yeah, we paid our donor database experts for help in that arena because we don't have a large
And
staff,
it's
but
still,
it's
yeah.
still, and we've taken it over now, and yes, it'll be ongoing.
I think, Steph, you gave a really helpful hint there for people who may be tackling this on their own. And that is whether you're doing looking to really dedupe your database or really do any kind of big work on your database. And that is, if possible, just export, everything out. So you just have that sitting somewhere, because you would not believe how often that comes in handy. I will tell you
Invasive
something.
emergency box folder.
Yeah, exactly. I will tell you something funny with working with sisters and the volume that they had, because I had never seen this before, which was because we were dealing with millions of records. We actually hit the limits of Excel, and I'd never seen
Yes.
it before. So,
I've
um,
hit the limits in NXT list too. Unfortunately, I had to learn the hard way that you can only get 60,000 constituents on one of your NXT lists too. And I'm like, no, I have so many.
so that's a great. What did you do? How did you work around that?
Oh yeah, we had to obviously break up data files into smaller segments when we were first working with exports and Excel files, for sure. And now, that's so far, I'm waiting for that to change. I'm waiting for Blackbot to expand their capabilities because so far I was told, yeah, just to segment out in different ways to create
Mm.
shorter lists if I want to use the NXT feature. But it's usually when I'm looking at totals, dashboards, or looking, I want to see
Yeah.
what those 50 or 80,000 donors, who they are, and pull them all into a list. Well, then I'm capped at 60,000. So,
Right.
but they'll get there.
I think too, with something like that, whether it's that you're trying to look at lists or whatever, then you also need to probably be so careful about those segments and making sure somehow you're not duplicating something weird in those segments, that you get overlap or, unintended double counts or anything. So yeah, hopefully Blackbot catches up.
Mhm.
So, so one thing I would love to talk about, and we just touched on this a little bit with, oops, a junior got mixed with a senior. Maybe talk about some of those instances that you ran into. So Denise, were there any along the way, any kind of uh-oh or oops moments, and were there certain ways that you tackled that?
There were, I don't remember specifics off the top of my head. In general, I believe that the ones that we did run into were the junior seniors, you know, we were fortunate because we did use Mergematic that it does put a note on the record to tell you what came in or that it had been merged. So that was definitely helpful. Um, I remember after the fact, finding one and having to split them apart. And thankfully, I was able to go back to the data that we brought in because, we exported all the data from all the old databases and we still have all of that. So I could kind of find them in there, you know, piece out, what I needed to pull back to two records. But really, what I came away from that with was get on that record as much data as you know about that person, suffixes, birth dates, middle initials, real first names, not just nicknames, all of that is going to help identify that this person is a different person than that person. So,
Yeah, spousal information was big for us too, to help identify. And sometimes we had where each of the partners had their own record, but for us, we didn't want to take up space with non-donors. We wanted to merge our couples so that there was only one primary head of household constituent and that the spouse became the non-constituent. So that was something else that we were looking at as well.
And I bet that presented some special challenges too.
Oh, definitely. And a lot of yes, a little extra digging on couples and as if one was alive or one was deceased, following up with obituary information, again, kind of putting as much information as we could onto the record to identify, maybe it was the wife that had the long giving history until she died, and now we're going to transfer the record to the husband, but we're going to note all of those things so that we know that she was the primary giver during her lifetime, and now the husband's taken over that account. So a lot of fine details, yes.
Yeah.
So, Steph, when people are faced with something like that, where it's not just merging records, but maybe it's even rethinking how you treat couples and who stands alone and who doesn't, and which record gets what thing, and how do you soft credit? What's kind of the thought process around that?
Yeah, I think that is really specific to the organization, how many records they have, what kind of work they do. So most of my experience in Razor's Edge prior to this job, was in healthcare. So a lot of times for us, it was important that they each have their own record if you were tracking anything patient data, especially, because it was very important to know, you know, they were separate people, or if you're really event heavy, sometimes that can be a reason to make sure they each have their own record. But a lot of times it is making sure that you have that spouse name because maybe John donates and then Sally comes along later and donates, but she doesn't have his name on her record when she makes the donation. If you don't know either one of them are married, you might see the same address and you could kind of guess that they're the same person, but it also could be siblings. It could be a mom and a son. You never really know. So I think Denise had a really good point about making sure you have as much accurate data on your donors as you can. Nicole mentioned obituaries, and I feel like to those people that aren't in the nonprofit data world, this sounds incredibly creepy, but obituaries are like a wealth of information. And I know that is super morbid. And I think my husband thinks I'm insane when he hears me say things like that. But, even if you don't add all those relationships actually in the record, if you find an obituary, always add it in because you're going to get basically the whole family tree in an obituary oftentimes. And that can really help figure out, oh, okay, this John is the second, this one's the third. And, I've seen it where like maybe someone's wife has the same name as his sister. So you don't necessarily know, if they're related or not. So, or how they're related. So, yeah, more
You
information
mentioned,
would be
Steph,
good.
some of the siblings and parents and children.
Yeah.
It's definitely something to look at households, and it happened to us as well. And there were times where we had to separate them back out. But
Yeah.
one of our challenges was that there's been a historically long direct mail program that included premium items like calendars or cards.
Oh.
So people would sign up to receive extra calendars
So they
or
would each
cards.
sign up separately?
Yes, they would sign up
Oh.
separately or they would add all of their family members at the same address. So that was also why that what I learned, why things were
Really,
happening.
really need 5 calendars for my house.
I hadn't even thought of that. That is crazy. Yes.
I'm used to seeing that like with events, especially if you have like, college kids or even a youth component to like a run walk or something, and you've now got 6 people at the same address and they maybe all came through separately on a registration form. And maybe you'll have an age and you can kind of do some digging, but yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think we see that too with some of the schools that we work with, especially around parents and then the students, and then the students become alums and move out, but they still at that address. And so that can also create a lot of kind of funky duplicates or merge situations.
Yeah, I
Or
think
even
back then I never wanted to change my address because I didn't want to have to get a new driver's license. So I had my my child's home address for 8 years while I was in college and afterwards. So sorry.
So we've danced around tools a little bit, and so Steph, I want to start with you. We mentioned Omatic. Could you talk a little bit first about what that is, and then I'm going to come back to you and talk a little bit about the native tools within Razor's Edge.
Yeah. So Omatic is another software company. Blackbaud often recommends them for integration pieces. I think they're, one of their preferred partners or whatever the term is there. And they have a couple pieces that are really, really helpful both for duplicates and in like Nicole's case, getting your record count down significantly. And I think Denise, you guys are using list management quite a bit too. So Omatic is the company. We are not affiliated with them, but I will probably sound like I am because I love them. And their matching process that they have, it works both in when you bring new lists in and you import, if you import through their tool, which is Importomatic, you can very you can customize highly how you want it to look for duplicates and identify them. And what's nice is it does it both on the constituent level and then also on the address and on the phones and on the spouse and all of those different pieces. So it's a great product. And then another tool that they have is Merge-O-Matic, which can be really nice if they're already in your system and you want to go figure out how to merge them. And I think you heard both Nicole and Denise mention what's nice is if you merge to a duplicate through Merge-O-Matic, it actually will put a note on the survivor record, the one that you keep, that is basically just an info dump of all of the data that was on the other record. So you can go back and see, oh, it was, the gift on 1/2/2020 was from this record. This, I think it's attributes, I think it's notes, it's actions, it's like all sorts of stuff. So you kind of have that built-in audit trail. And then the one kind of fun little tip for everyone on this call, if you haven't already, is even if you don't pay for Omatic, you can go run a sample through their Merge-O-Matic and have it scan your whole database, and you can duplicate or you can merge 100 for free to try it out. But before that, you can see the list of all of the potential duplicates it identifies. So without paying for it. So that's something we often do for our clients, even if they're not paying for anything through Omatic, is that gives us a really great idea of, how big of a cleanup project is it for them. They can say, oh, there's 5,000, 10,000, 800,000 duplicates in their database. And then the other piece that's kind of tangent to this is Omatic also has a software called list management where the best way to explain it is it like taps into those non-constituent records in Razor's Edge. So you can store people kind of in this, not like a shadow database. It kind of lives right on
I call
top
it the
of
parking lot.
I like that.
Good way to
Yeah.
put it.
And it's
Yeah.
like in Razor's Edge, kind of. So it's like for people on the call, if you don't know what it is, it's like if you have a constituent and they have a spouse, but they're not a full constituent, you can see them and you can see actions, you can, attributes, all of that kind of stuff, addresses, salutations, but they're not a full constituent. Or same with like a event participant that's not a full constituent. They're like in there, but not a full record. List management taps into that capability, and you can have, I did ask them before we started working with sisters if there was a limit, and there is not. They may change their answer more, but
I'm sorry if I broke it for everyone.
right, as of now, there is no limit. So you can have them. We have a lot of patients that use that a lot of patients. We have a lot of clients that might use that for like patient acquisition lists or acquisition mailings where you want them to kind of live in Razor's Edge, but you don't need them to take up a full constituent record until they actually become donors. So that's another great way to kind of prevent some of those dupes and the like bloating of your constituent count.
Great. And I do want to come back to, again, what we're sort of dancing around with that, which is record reduction, which is kind of adjacent to merging and something that both organizations were working on. But I know, Denise, you talked about that, your organization has worked primarily, I think, addressing these issues using OMATIC. How user-friendly do you find it?
I find it very user friendly. Honestly, when we started our whole process of conversion, I had never used Importomatic before. And honestly, I hadn't really done even that much importing directly into Razor's Edge. That wasn't one of my, skills, big skill sets when I started. And um, so we, contracted with Importomatic at the very beginning, and they came in and taught us how to use it and helped us through creating profiles and all the different things that we needed. And really, we went to town and used it, and without a lot of um, issues at all. Um, and then, like I said, the Mergematic, that came along later, and we didn't really have any problems with that. And list management has been uh, a lifesaver because we are, like you said, going through the record reduction. And instead of taking the records out and just deleting them out of our database, we're demoting them into list management. So we still have all the data that's on those records, but it lives in list management and doesn't count towards our record count anymore. So that definitely eases some of the anxiety that our markets have of, where'd my records go? So
Yeah, yeah,
that's
it's not
been
living
wonderful. Yes.
It's not living on some spreadsheet off somewhere, which I think
Right.
is every data person's nightmare.
Exactly.
Yeah, I see some questions and comments coming in, and that is great, and we will absolutely weave those in. Um, and Nicole, before I toss this question over to you, for those of you who don't know, these tools live in the plugins area of the database view. So if you're looking for them, if you want to try out the sample that Steph alluded to, that's where you would go, is to the plugins area. So Nicole, with working with a third party tool like things through Omatic, what was your experience with it?
I also enjoy Omatic. We should be getting paid to advertise for them because I've used them quite a bit. I was told a long time ago that they were all former Blackbaud employees that split off and started the company. So they're very familiar, with the developer side of Blackbaud. I've used them for posting Post-O-Matic with your finance team, which is amazing. And I've used the Import-O-Matic and now the Merge-O-Matic and the list management. One of the comments that came in or questions was that the setup is a little tedious for small shops. And yeah, I can agree with that, especially if you've never seen it before. There's just a little learning curve to it, but I did find the support there, the support team to be very helpful and willing to train people and stuff. So once you get it set up, there you can kind of walk away for a little while. Like usually you don't have to go back and tweak too much. So if you can make it through the setup, I think it's worth it. So yeah, so the duplicate merge tool I agree with is really easy. It gives you one area to focus on to really pick out and identify those survivors. And it I think everything that everyone's already said, like adding the notes, adding the detail, being able to um, really have everything combined, at the click of a button for you is really what makes it really extra nice than than the tools that are available in NXT. I remember when NXT first came out with their duplicate merge tool, and we thought, wow, this is amazing. Like that had been so much more advanced than the old database view ways of doing things. But now it is nice to go into NXT and kind of see what they identify for you as duplicates. But when you have Omatic, it's just a quicker way to get it all done.
Yeah, and we are definitely going to take a deeper dive here into the native merge process. I want to address the comment that you also touched on, Nicole, because it's a good and important one. That the comment is that the setup for Importomatic is tedious for small shops, and this is absolutely someone making this comment who's been in the trenches with this product. And so I'll touch on it, and then Steph, you can jump in and fill in or correct because I have used Importomatic, and you've never seen so many checkboxes or radio buttons in your entire life. And I will say that it is easy for things to go off the rails if you don't make sure you have all those checkboxes and radio buttons and settings and conditions really thought through. You can set up for sort of different base kind of, models that you would typically use. We always still say, even if you've got it preset, go in and check again before you do any merging, just to be sure. But it's not wrong that it is a tedious and detailed setup. Once you have it, it is easier. You still have to check everything. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that comment. Steph, do you have any thoughts about that around the setup part?
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think with the Importomatic, especially, it can feel incredibly overwhelming because there are so many pieces you can do. I do think for the Merge-O-Matic piece, it is a lot less intimidating. And I think there are a lot of options out there. But I also think that if you just want to get a feel for what's out there, and this is more on the Merge-O-Matic side, their default suggestions for how to identify duplicates are really well done too. So even if you don't tweak any of those and just let it kind of go off of what O-Matic recommends, it's a great place to start. It's a lot better than the first two letters of your first name and first two letters of your last name or whatever Razor's Edge tries to do inherently. I'll kind of echo too. I think O-Matic support is pretty good when you're a new customer. I also feel like we should probably mention there are other tools too. I know Importacular is another one that we've used with different clients if that's what they've purchased, and that can do a good job identifying duplicates on the way in to Razor's Edge too. So just know, like, we all happen to have a lot of experience with O-Matic, so that's what we're talking about. But there are other tools out there too that can be used as well. So.
Great. Before we dive into discussion around using the native tools, we have a really great question that I want to throw out to the group because each organization might be looking at this differently. And then, Steph, you can also speak to how we look at it. Again, every organization is a little different. But the comment is, what would you recommend as a best practice when dealing with companies that merge or when one company buys out another? Do you typically merge those company records, or do you keep both and add notes to reflect the change? What would you each recommend? Denise, I'm gonna put you on the spot first. So is there a specific way that Unity approaches these scenarios?
Honestly, I think it depends on the company. It depends on their history donating to Unity Point Health, the market that they are in, and if it's another market, like maybe the one that's merging with is from a different market. So I mean, I think that there's so many different variables that we probably wouldn't have just one answer necessarily.
Sure.
Right. Nicole, does sisters have a certain way of approaching this?
Yeah, we all love a case by case basis, don't we? Yeah, so when one company buys out another, I mean, I guess I would also want to investigate, is it truly one company going forward? Because then we could attach perhaps an alias, some kind of known name or doing business as name, where we could keep track of that. But if they're going to be, donating as one entity going forward, I may be inclined to keep it that way. But just like Denise said, there's going to be different situations, and you may have a really long history with one company and reasons that you want to keep that all intact on its own. So I'd probably still put a relationship on the two, or another kind of note that says these two are now connected either by a parent company or some other relationship.
Great. And Steph, what are your thoughts around that?
I think Nicole, the parent relationship can be really helpful if it's not like a subsidiary kind of thing. What I usually look at, sorry, what I try to think of first and foremost, because it's usually in my experience been like a gift officer saying, okay, we know this person bought them out, but I really want to know who gave when, kind of like who generated that giving in the past. Um, so it's a little bit of that, and for me, it's a little bit of recognition. So if you have donor walls, which I think a lot of people do, um, let's say it's company A buys out company B. Going forward, is it important to recognize that company A gave you $50,000 lifetime giving and company B gave you 25? Or is it important to know that um, company B gave you 75 total and they get to take credit for whatever the right phrase is there for, the original donations too. So a lot of it kind of plays into that. It's a really bad, there's exceptions to exceptions, non-answer, I realize. But I think you just have to think of it. For me, what Razor's Edge is at the core is a donor management system, right? And so contrary to whatever accounting might want for it, or pledges and things like that all play into it. Um, it's really like, how do you need to relate to the donor, what it is? And so, I mean, I've done a little bit of everything depending on what the situation called for. I've left them separate, but soft credited the new organization for all of the old organizations giving. If it's important to see both of them, I think sometimes it matters if it's a merge. Is it, someone bought it out that they created, came together and created a brand new company. So I think you just really need to think through what if you ask the donor or the company, like, how do they see that giving? How do they see that relationship with you? And sometimes it's, we bought out this company, but they still have their own marketing team and they're going to sponsor an event under this name, but we're going to donate to you onto the capital campaign under this name. And it is important that we get recognized under both of these entities. Then you need to keep them separate. So that's my non-answer. Answer.
Okay, so as we head into the home stretch here, what I would love to do is talk a little bit about the native process. Someone's actually has asked in the comments, are we as donor database experts still recommending that people don't use the NXT merge function? That was our recommendation for a time because of lost data. And for a while we were recommending it, for a while we weren't. NXT is absolutely like the shifting field of lava. But so, Steph, could you talk a little bit about that? And then we have a really excellent follow-up question about addressing participant and relationship records. So, Steph, if you could first give the basics of how we're recommending merging within the database.
Yeah. I think it's another one of those where you know your data really well, more than anyone else. And unfortunately, I think the reality right now in Razor's Edge is there are still fields that WebView cannot merge, and there are fields that database view won't capture, like your attachments. So I think it depends. And if it's a situation like Nicole or Denise, where you're first bringing data in and you're trying to do them, and there aren't a lot of gifts, there might not be a lot of, actions with attachments, media, things like that yet, and you've got O-matic, that's going to be your best bet because you can do it very clean and it kind of retains that note for you. If you know that you've got fundraisers working in WebView, you've got gifts being entered in WebView and database view, or whatever that looks like. In an ideal world, you're going, especially if it's, a larger donor and you want to make sure you got all the stuff. In an ideal world, you're going to go into WebView, merge as much of that info over as you can, and then go into database view and do the actual record merge. That's kind of the best way to capture all of the information. I think we all know, the attachments is the big piece right now. So it is a more long-winded way to it, but I think it's especially if you're doing one-off merges like that, your best bet is to kind of just get both records open in both views and just make sure you're not missing anything. So you can do the merge and not delete the original constituent, and then go check on the other side and make sure all of that data, there's nothing left on that other record. And then you can go ahead and delete it. So it's not a fun answer, I know, but it is the most thorough way to make sure you're capturing everything.
It is, yeah, and as Nicole mentioned, I agree. The NXT setup for merging is really elegant
It does, yeah.
and user friendly. But there are just some things it might not capture. And for those of us who are old school and maybe used to using the database view, there's things that it will not capture. So I think this two-pronged approach is very thorough. I never like to assume the depth of knowledge of people who are attending here. So if you don't know this, one thing that you can see in database view after you've merged records is on the non-survivor record. Oh my God, that is morbid. You should start to see fewer red checks on the
Oh,
tabs
yeah.
because as the data gets merged, most, not all, but most just gets completely pulled off of the record. So that's a kind of a good way to tell, what things have been pulled in. But yeah, I agree with Steph that that final step is always in database view, having them up next to each other and just manually cross-checking.
Yeah. And I do hope and think that's something that will improve in WebView as they bring all of the functionality over there. So like before, you really didn't want to merge everything in WebView because the tributes weren't there, weren't accessible to do in the merge. So things like, tributes were a big piece of it. I'm kind of blanking out on what the other big ones were, but I know that was the one that was the sticking point for a lot of people. So hopefully as they continue to build out the rest of the functionality in WebView, there will be just a one option answer.
Great. And so the last question that we have, which is a really good one, are the recommendations on cleaning up dupes that exist across participant or relationship records? The person asking this is struggling to merge these in NXT because they're hard to put together. So Steph, I'll have you jump in first, and then Denise and Nicole, I'll see if this is something you've struggled with as you've gone through many, 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 many merges.
Um, it's a good question that honestly I don't have a great answer for. I think it is a lot of pulling the data out and looking at it. Not to go back to, a broken record here, but that is one thing that if you're looking for dupes in Omatic and Merge Omatic, it can actually look at non-constituent records, which is huge for me because with our clients now and in nonprofit life before this, both of the organizations I worked at for a while were very heavy in events. So we had a lot of guest participants. And it actually can look for those there. So it can say, okay, it's me and my husband is only on my record as a non-constituent spouse, but he's also maybe has his own record from when he attended, an event. It can say, oh, hey, that his name is Jeremy, whatever. That Jeremy is the same as the one that's the non-constituent spouse on my record. And it'll say, do you think this is the same person? And you get to choose that. In NXT, I don't think it's searching through non-constituents yet.
It is. It just started. I found them.
Did it just start?
Maybe it's only if you have Omatic turned on. I don't know, but mine are showing up.
Okay, good. So yeah, so it's you'll have an option there. And again, I think that's a piece that they're going to continue building out and improving functionality on, especially now that you can do guests and participants in events easily in NXT. All those that functionality is kind of coming over.
There's one of the things that wasn't for me like trying to find the non-constituent to match with a real constituent to identify that kind of duplication, but we also had a thing where we were just getting duplicate entries of the relationship, like 5 says a spouse, right? So we can query for those things and work on cleaning those things up that way.
I think that's a good point too, that when you do a merge of records, it can be really tempting to just merge them all and worry about the duplicate data later. But if you have a large merge going on, and I'm merging two people that both have a spouse or both, they have, we saw it with that, and we saw it a lot with attributes and things like that, that you need to go into the other record and start cleaning it up, or duplicate addresses, things like that. You do need to do that check after you've merged the records, because Razor's Edge, and I don't think even Omatic are, know that, okay, merge these records, but this address is the same on both of them. Only keep one of them. So there is some cleanup after you've merged the records too.
Denise, have you had anything around the non-constituent and the constituent participants?
The only experience I have with that is using Merge-O-Matic to find if the individual relationships match with the constituent.
Great. Okay. All right, well, we are getting near the end of our time here. We didn't really get to do a deep dive into record reduction, and I think that's actually probably something people would be very interested in. So I smell a sequel and may ask
Something
Denise.
around purge planning is coming our way.
Before you start running all your year-end mailing lists, right?
Right.
Right.
So yeah, Denise and Nicole, I may beg you to come back and be on the panel again because this has been wonderful. Thank you. And Steph, thank you for taking time out of your busy day. I do want to hype up our next webinar, which is going to be on September 23rd. And Steph sort of said those words that put fear in all of our hearts, which is a year-end mailing. So it is chaos to clarity, getting ready for your year-end mailings because with September, it'll be that time of year to start putting those together. So please join us for that. We will send out an email again. There will be a recording available of this webinar, so do look for that email. As always, there will be a survey. Please feel free to let us know what you thought, what topics you want to hear about. We feel like this time is yours, and we want to really give you the knowledge that you need. So thank you so much for attending, and have a great day.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Marlisa.
Lisa.
Thank you.
Thanks, Denise and Nicole.